Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking for a professional website without breaking our budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Apple, Google Play, and other platforms coming near you. Take the Mike Wagner Show on any mobile device and subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. We're here with a wonderful gentleman from the Netherlands. He's the author of 10 books about rational living. He's lived in Germany, Italy, France, and Spain. And I guess we'll have to find out where he's getting to next. He's been interested in history and also interested in personal development and talking about rational living. And of course, talking about in times of turmoil, what can people learn and everything else. And, just basically about his version of common sense. So live from the Netherlands on the other side of the pond, as people would say, ladies and gentlemen, the rational living king himself, John Vespasian. John, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Wow, you're coming pretty clear. So, when you say from the pond, you don't have to yodel, but that's okay, though. So, with new technology, we can hear ourselves perfect here. So, you're the author of 10 books about rational living. You lived in Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. You also have books called When Everything Fails, Try This. Rationality is a way to happiness. Philosophy of Builders, 10 Principles of Rational Living, and more. And, of course, before we get started, tell us how you became an author.
Yeah, out of sheer frustration, I must say. I've been reading books about history, personal development, personal finance for decades. And at a certain point, I became very frustrated with the kind of books I could get. I find most of the advice you can find in the area of personal finance, personal development, very superficial, very often misleading. So I started to write the kind of books I could not find. Books are very factual, based on history, based on real people. What I do in my books is to go through dozens and dozens of biographies from different centuries to try to draw principles, recommendations that we can use today in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. And in your version is, what is rational living?
Rational living is the way I call this philosophy, which is very much based on reason, common sense, to oppose what we have today in the 21st century, where people become very often extremely emotional. When you read the newspapers or you listen to the media, you see people going completely insane for little things, becoming very aggressive. It's a pity that our society is going backwards in civility, in reason. And what I'm trying to do in my books is to try to learn from history what we should do and what we should refrain from doing. And unfortunately, many people today still believe that the key to happiness is pure emotion, pure irrationality. This is a very dangerous trend that very often leads to violence.
And do you think the social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the like, has that caused a fuel to be doused in the fire, or do you think that's helped, make people rational somehow?
Well, we now focus on social media because it's so instantaneous. But when we go through the book and we go through different stories, you see that there was always some kind of media in history. When we go to the 19th century, for instance, you see that in a city like Moscow, New York, or Bremen, they used to have dozens and dozens of newspapers. So it's not that now we have more media, it's more instantaneous. And the only thing you get with social media is an amplification, magnification of trends. It's not something new, it's not something that people learn something new, it's just that they confirm their bias. And if you believe something that is nonsense or that is misleading, you will find confirmation in some kind of social media. You will find confirmation in some kind of books. And unfortunately, instead of using the possibilities for learning, people use them very often to amplify distortions.
Mm-hmm. And also too, you talked about philosophy as well too. What are some of the philosophers that you read up on, and who are some of your influence? Like say with Freud, and also I'm trying to think about another one. Going back to Socrates and everything. What are some of the philosophers that have influenced you into writing these books?
Well, I would say that if I have to name just a few, I would mention Aristotle. I would mention Schopenhauer. I would mention the ancient Roman Stoics. But from each philosopher, you can learn many things, even if you learn what to avoid. So in the books, I go also through lives of many philosophers because sometimes you learn more important things by looking at what people actually do than by reading their books. And when you see the lives of philosophers like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, you can learn very interesting lessons that you will not learn from their books.
Mm-hmm. And also too, have you yourself studied philosophy while you're going to school or going to college, or you just pick up and also have you also read things like with Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and other parts of history?
Yeah, I had a humanities training in my early years, and then I have read really dozens, maybe hundreds of books on philosophy. So it's a hobby of mine, the same as history. But again, what I try to do in my books is to draw practical principles we can implement. I'm not very interested in discussing theoretical philosophy, theoretical history. This is why people dislike history so much, because you go to school and you get forced to memorize useless dates, useless names, useless battles, but you don't learn the principles. And the great thing about history is learning the principles, learning what other people have done in similar circumstances so that we don't repeat the same mistakes.
And do you think as time goes on, do you think a lot of schools are altering the history books just to appease the people, or do you think it's just trying to abridge the history, or what are other reason you think it is?
It is relatively normal in history that people will recount the history, the stories, with a bias. And you will find this in the 13th century, 14th century. I was just reading a book about medieval Russia, where they actually try to argue that they have the true center of Christianity, and they did it as propaganda for propaganda purposes very successfully. So in every history period, you will find people rewriting the past, rewriting ideas. This is perfectly normal. It's not that people have become evil today. The important thing is that you try to find the truth, you try to get a balanced idea so that you can avoid repeating the same mistakes.
And also in terms of the economic social status as well too, and of course you read about what's happening in America and with our current president. And do you think the switch over to socialism is going to be good for America, or you think it's going to ruin the country? Because America has been operating on capitalism for quite a long time.
Well, to a certain extent, what we have today is a very confusing discussion. When you look at history, you look at different countries and different cultures, different civilizations, you see that civilization rests only on one principle. It is not religion, it is not democracy, it is not freedom of speech. It rests on one principle, which is private property. And private property, you can project it in many different ways. In history, you have different legal systems, you have different political systems. But as long as you have a protection of private property, you have a civilization that will stand and will resist many, many things, many mistakes, a lot of evil and malevolence. And it's a pity that people today, when we go to school and we go to university, we forget this basic principle. And we get lost in discussions in minutiae, in the little details, but we forget about the main principle. If we keep protecting private property, in Western countries, Eastern countries, in wherever, we'll have prosperity and we'll have freedom, because it all comes from that. You can call it ancient Roman law, you can call it ancient Greek law, you can call it Christianity, but it all rests on private property. If we remove the protection of private property, if we weaken the protection of private property, civilization will eventually collapse.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting too. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about your books. Listen to the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/the Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, and iTunes, Google Play, and Apple. And take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device, and subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. We're with author John Vespasian, the author of 10 books about rational living, including Rationality is the Way to Happiness, The Philosophy of Builders, When Everything Fails, Try This, 10 Principles of Rational Living, Rational Working, Consistency, the Key to Permanent Stress Relief, on Becoming Unbreakable, and more. You can find this on Amazon, and more of these well too. It may sound very confusing and irrational, but of course, you pick up these books, you'll find it makes a lot of sense. And speaking from the Netherlands, talking to author John Vespasian, and just reading about the books as well too. But in the Netherlands, like compared to the countries you live in, like with Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and how do you compare the culture to the Netherlands compared to the culture you live in, like in Germany, Italy, France, and Spain?
Well, usually small countries have a great advantage because people know each other. We are living together in a small area, and it makes corruption very difficult. I have to say that when you're living in an area, I mean, you have to realize, compared to ancient Greece, and you see the great period of prosperity in the 5th century with Pericles, and Athens was 300,000 people, and they created this amazing civilization. So I would compare today countries like the Netherlands, Austria, is the current equivalent of the ancient Greek civilization, because we have these small countries, very prosperous, people for the most part are very tolerant, very intelligent, hardworking, and I think this is the kind of society that is guaranteeing in the future a very prosperous civilization.
It sounds like the Italians pretty much are more into people, interacting with people. They talk with their hands, they interact, they hug, and everything else. Do you think that's really lacking in society today, especially with the Me Too movement in America, don't touch, and whatever else?
That's an interesting question, but in the countries I've lived, the way people actually interact when you get to a level of friendship is very similar. It's just that in some cultures people are just more noisy, and they try to exaggerate a little bit details. To live in Italy, I have to say, for Northern Europeans can be tiring, because we are not used to such an effusion of feelings and wordiness. So these are little details, but essentially Europeans and Americans, we are pretty much the same. We're very much rational. Most people are pretty much benevolent, respectful. So I think we have a great civilization, and all these cultural details, they are very interesting for movies, but in real life, you see a very big Italian company and a big German company. They operate exactly the same as an American company.
Wow. Okay. So the Germans and Italians operate like America, but what about Spain and France?
There are little differences in mentality, but you have no choice when you have any kind of business, especially if you want to expand abroad. to become aseptic to discrimination. And all these companies, I think this is one thing that is very much overlooked at the media when they attacked free trade or they attacked global trade, that the way these big companies operate is very much neutral. They try to avoid discrimination because it's very ineffective. It's very inefficient to work like this. They try to create environments for working that are open for all kind of talents, because you cannot really run a big company without having the best engineers, the best lawyers, the best marketing people. And sometimes they're going to be from other nationalities with other languages, skin color, whatever. So I think this is a very positive factor in our culture, and people overlook it because they just focus on the thing, because they are foreigners, they're foreigners. Don't be a fool. If you're running a business and you want to have a prosperous economy, you want the best talent you can get. And what we see in multinational companies is that they know how to use this talent extremely well.
Amazing, too. And how about the business and social culture in the Netherlands?
The Netherlands people are very tolerant. And sometimes when I read the news from other countries where people are very much focused on what to say, language or race or nationality origins, we find it difficult to understand, I have to say, because we live in a country with many different cultures. And you can walk in a small city and you can have Chinese people, you can have people from other countries. And it's very peaceful and trade goes very well. So sometimes I think that people should travel more and see other countries and see other cultures. As we see in history, you see in history the close countries, they tend to become very unrealistic about trade and business. When people live in small countries, they are forced to travel because the country is so small. If you want to make money, you want to have a career, you have to travel. And I would recommend people in other countries, especially big countries, to try to learn a second language, to travel abroad. And I think many ideas people have about foreigners, about fear sometimes we have of foreigners, they are very much overdone. When you have a business or you have a career, you have a passion for traveling, you will discover many opportunities and many friendships that otherwise, if you just stay in one place and you forget about the rest of the world, you tend to become very inefficient.
Amazing. That's something to keep in mind. I'm thinking about traveling myself too. And of course, you've lived in these countries as well too. And what country would you wouldn't mind living in as well too? Like say if you got another job offer, like say in Russia or go to Iran or Australia or Canada, let's say, which country would you like to visit next and why?
Russia is a fascinating place. I think it's underappreciated because it's a bit close. The language is very different from Latin languages. It's a Slavic language. But I think in the next 10, 20 years, if the situation improves and there is a little bit more evolution, it has a lot of potential. You have to realize the level of education of people is extremely high. And the potential is very big. So if I have to say in Europe, a country that is underappreciated at this moment, I would say Russia.
That is interesting. And I've talked to people who want to go to Russia. St. Petersburg seems to be the number one. And I'm trying to figure out why St. Petersburg, besides being the oldest. Sounds fascinating.
Because it's like going to Disneyland, but everything is true because it was built in the 17th, 18th century. Basically, it's that you are walking on the 18th century because they have restored all the buildings. Many were destroyed during the war because the Nazis, when they invaded Russia, they had the headquarters in St. Petersburg. And when they lost the war, they burned down many buildings. So they actually rebuilt the whole thing in the last 40 years. And you have to realize that many things they have been rebuilt by hand because when they have these palaces where they have paintings on the walls and they have to do everything by hand. So it took hundreds and hundreds of people to do it. Wow. If you go there, even if it's only for 5 days, you'll be amazed because it's like walking on a marble palace. It's extremely beautiful. It's very harmonious. The museums are possibly the best in the world. It's a dream. I think if you go to Europe, I would say it should be a prime destination.
That is amazing too. And of course, it sounds like you also have spoken several languages. You can tell us about some of the languages, and maybe you can just utter a phrase or a few in either your native tongue or the countries you've been in. I'd love to hear them.
Well, I could speak Spanish. I could say hello, how are you doing? Para los americanos, un saludo. Recomiendo que aprendan español.
Amazing.
Which means that I recommend every American to try to learn some Spanish. They will become, I think, very enthusiastic about Hispanic culture. And in some areas, it would diminish the irritation that I see sometimes in the news, that people have these bad feelings about other cultures. I think the U.S. is a great country. It's people are extremely hardworking, extremely intelligent, but the greatness and the bigness makes for very Americans. They think it's unnecessary to learn other languages, and I think this is would be an asset for many Americans to learn the second language. It's also very easy, because if you are an English speaker and you live in the U.S., I think it should be relatively easy to learn some Spanish. And I think it will open even more possibilities for many Americans.
That is amazing too, and of course, it's also the key to happiness. We'll talk about some of the books we'll finally get to. This is fascinating. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Looking for a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Apple, and Google Play. And take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device, and subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. We're with author John Vespasian, the author of 10 books about rational living, including When Everything Fails, Try This, Rationality is the Way to Happiness, Philosophy of Builders, and more. Author of 10 books, lived in Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. It feels like I've gone on a very, very wonderful world tour as well, too. And I'm glad I was able to hop over the pond and talk to John as well, too. Let's talk about a few of your books. When Everything Fails, Try This. Let's talk about your first book. Sounds fascinating.
This is a novel. This is the first book I wrote. I wrote a novel about people who change their lives when they're facing a very critical situation. And the novel is about an industrialist who has cancer and thinks he doesn't have a long time to live. And what he does is to hire a professor to make research to develop a cancer cure by using monkeys and doing tests with monkeys.
Wow.
And there are many people who oppose the tests with monkeys, radical ecologists, animalists. So they try to stop the test. And in the book, you see the fight between the people who want to get the cure for cancer and the people who want to stop the test because they don't want to have tests with animals. So it's a novel. There are ideas behind. It's quite complex. I think it's very entertaining as well. And after that, I started to write nonfiction because I think it's easier to put across my ideas when I write nonfiction.
And what are some of the nonfiction books you have written as well? Since you've brought that up, it's interesting.
Yeah, the last one is titled. The latest one is titled "Undisrupted." And what I've done is to go through dozens of biographies of people who have done very well in times of adversity, of disruptions. And I compare them with people who have destroyed their lives and try to explain why some people are very intelligent, they have a lot of experience, they have high education, but eventually they make huge mistakes and they destroy their companies and their lives. And there are different principles. I will just mention one of the main ideas of the book. One of the principles you see repeatedly is, for instance, the typical entrepreneur who has a very successful company and then starts another company and destroys his whole life because he makes huge mistakes. And the principle behind is always the same. When you are facing problems, you are facing adversity, you are facing a difficult market, when you see people doing well, they always go back to what they know best. They just let go of their new ventures, their new mistakes, their errors, and they go back, they retreat into an area where they have a lot of confidence. They go back to their relationships, they go back to their key skills, they go back to a business they know very well, and they let go of the rest. They admit they are mistakes, and they say, okay, I made a mistake. I don't know, I lost a relationship, I lost a business. Big deal. I'll go back to what I do best, and then I recover. And you see this pattern very often. And just to finish the idea, people who destroy their lives, they improvise. When they get a problem, they say, oh, I can do anything. I can do everything. I'm so clever. I can get into any business. I can do anything. And they destroy their lives, literally. And you will see in this book in many different examples. It's something. It's a rule that almost knows no exceptions.
It sounds like you're going back to square one, which is probably the most common thing people do. But sometimes we fail to do that, going back to square one.
Yes, but it's not that you have to let go of your dreams and say, okay, I'm going to stay always in the same job or in the same. No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you want to live a life which is relatively undisrupted and you don't want to go all the time into a carousel of disaster and success and disaster and success, which I think is not a good way to live. The best approach and the best strategy, as proven in many stories I tell in the book, in many biographies, is to try to evolve little by little, to build your skills, to build your market experience. Even if it takes a few decades, in the end, you will have a career, you have a life which is very much solid, and you will not go down at the first adversity. I go in the book, for example, I go into the Middle Ages to examine the examples of the Knights Templar. It was a very powerful military organization, and they arrested 6 people, the 6 leaders, and they collapsed completely overnight. 20,000 people, the most powerful military organization in the Middle Ages, they collapsed literally overnight because they arrested a bunch of leaders. And when you look into the story behind, you see the principle. They were disorganized. They had a huge overhead. They were not ready to deal with disruptions. And when you go into the stories in the book and you extract the principles, you see that they are not so much linked to technology. They are linked to human psychology. And we tend to make today the same mistakes that people were making in the Middle Ages, they were making in ancient Greece, because the human psychology has not changed. And the same problems we have today with arrogance, ignorance, bias, cultural bias, the same problems we have today is the same problems they had 2,000 years ago.
That's amazing, too. And once again, what is the key to dealing effectively with disruptions?
The key is to try to think long term. And you see people, I'm not talking about the thinking in terms of centuries, I'm thinking in terms of a lifetime. Most people today are going to live 90 years, 95 years. If you take good care of yourself, you will make it to 90. And the way people think today when you have a problem is that they are going to die tomorrow. And they go into panic and they become very emotional, they break down. And you see in the US only, there are 50 million people taking medication against stress, depression, anxiety. And this is because they have this short-term vision that they cannot see the future, they cannot see 5 years, 10 years, 90 years. And I say, if you think in terms of a lifetime, and you try to make decisions with this perspective and say, okay, I'm going to live 90 years. I have a problem today. I have a problem this year, but eventually, after a decade, 2 decades, the problem will be insignificant. If you keep this perspective in your decisions, you will become much more calm. You will not be so much subject to anxiety. and you will not need to have medication for stress because you will be a very effective person.
That is amazing too. And can also positive thinking help people deal effectively with disasters of all sorts?
You have to be very careful with positive thinking. And I go into great detail in the book because today is a very fashionable idea. You have this positive thinking, you have this law of attraction, and you have this neuro-linguistic programming. It's basically the same concept. And to understand how it works and how it doesn't work very often, you have to go to the history, to the inventor, creator of positive thinking. Let's go into that for a couple of minutes because it's very interesting. Positive thinking as a theory is very recent. It's something. It was invented basically in the 19th century by a Frenchman. His name was Émile Coué, and he was a pharmacist. And this guy who had a pharmacy in a small village, he wanted to be successful. So he eventually saw an advertisement in a newspaper for a course on hypnotism. So he took the course for a week. He had to close the pharmacy. He went back and he learned about suggestion. And he started to use suggestion on his customers to sell them medicines. He sold them herbal preparations. So Coué, who was a pharmacist, he was a scientist, he was a university graduate, he made the statistics. And he actually, very detailed statistics, and he actually proved that positive thinking works because he created in his customers the picture of recovery. And when he told them, look, this is going to be very good for you, you have to take it twice a day, you will recover very quickly. And he made statistics, and he actually proved that it works, but it's not that people became magically cured. The effect of positive thinking, as used by Coué in the 19th century, is the reinforcement of positive beneficial behavior. And he was actually creating this picture of health to actually motivate people to take their medication. And they took the medication twice a day or whatever it was, and they got better because they were motivated. They have this picture of recovery. So positive thinking can work, and it actually works very well when it promotes rational behavior, when it promotes a beneficial behavior. But if you just isolate positive thinking on its own and you say, oh, I'm going to just believe, I'm going to do it, this will not work because it's just pure fantasy. So you have to take positive thinking, you have to put it in the right context. And if you go to the roots of the 19th century, when it was created, it was a very scientific approach. Today, unfortunately, has become a mythical, completely insane theory. Many people believe that if they just repeat 25 a day, I'm going to make it, it makes any difference. It doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is to motivate yourself to do the right things.
That is amazing too. Every time I think about positive thinking, I think about Norman Vincent Peale, and I'm glad to know that you talk about the guy from France being the godfather of it instead of Norman Vincent Peale. Another one I had thought of as well too is Patch Adams. He actually is a doctor and actually helped sick children laugh and actually made them feel better without medication. It made me think of it as well too.
Yeah, every aspect of human psychology can be used positively if you link it rationally to good behavior. So you can use it for education, you can use it for your career, you can use it as a salesman if you're in sales. It can be very good for marketing, for motivation, but again, it has to be linked to actual action. What you have to avoid is magical thinking that people say, I'm going to do it, and then you actually do nothing. This is very dangerous, and I think actually it's a cause of massive depression. And I think many people today who are suffering from anxiety and depression is because of positive thinking, because they do not understand that it has to be linked to action.
That is amazing too. And some people go back to nature as a recipe for happiness. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very skeptical, and in the book I presented a whole chapter which is called "Be Careful When Going Back to Nature," because when you look in history and you see many examples, you see that people who actually are very effective in their lives and they go through problems and they solve very difficult situations, they're very practical. They're very much oriented to reality. And this does not prevent meditation, it does not prevent reflection, but you have to do it in a practical way. What does not work is the fantasy that you are going to stop civilization, you go to live in a village, you are going to grow your own vegetables, you are going to sew your own clothes, you are going to make your own shoes. This is pure fantasy. It's absolute nonsense that people are going to live in this way, because I mean basically you will go to a standard of living of the, I don't know, Middle Ages, and you will be working 20 hours a day just to have some peanuts on your plate. I mean, it would be completely ridiculous. So going back to nature, it's very good if you just go on holidays, you go for a couple of weeks to relax, but does not solve any problem itself. I think it's an opportunity for meditation, opportunity for improvement, but don't fall into the fantasy of going back to the Middle Ages and to actually do everything yourself. If you try to fall into this fantasy, basically you are asking to destroy prosperity, to destroy civilization, to destroy free trade. It's absolute nonsense, and I'm appalled that you see people defending this kind of nonsense and people actually believing going back to nature, going back to the jungle, going back to the Middle Ages does not work. We have a great civilization. We have to improve it, but we should not destroy it.
And speaking of the Middle Ages, you brought up a really good point. Your book contains a section about cathedral builders in the Middle Ages. What can we learn from them?
We can learn a lot, actually, because you see people facing very difficult problems to build these cathedrals in the 12th century. We're talking 12th century, 13th century. Technology was very primitive. They had linguistic problems because people spoke 20 different languages in Europe. They could not even read, so you could not give them instructions. Winter was very cold, so they could not work outside. So it was really a mess. And even in this terrible mess, terrible problems of transportation, they built these cathedrals within 50 years. I mean, it's amazing.
Wow.
I look into the management behind, because the technology was available in the 8th century. The problem was a problem of management, because until the 11th century, nobody knew how to put together all the elements to actually build a very complex cathedral, even if the technology was available. And it was one guy his name was Suger, and I present the whole story in the book in great detail because I find it super interesting, who actually took the time to think how he could build a very high cathedral, innovative, using these very big windows, huge space, and he found a way to do it, a management system. And I present it in the book because it's very similar to what Japanese companies invented in the 70s. Maybe you heard about the Toyota production system. It's very similar. And they invented actually in the Middle Ages. And the idea is that Suger created a system where his 200 people, he had 200 employees, they could work all through the year with minimum disruptions. And he actually thought every detail about how to protect his workforce so they could actually be productive. For instance, just to give you an idea, until Suger, it was usual to hire people in May and to fire them in October when the winter arrived, because they could not actually work outside. Mm-hmm. And so he realized that this was a mess. It was very inefficient to hire people and to fire people. So he wanted to keep expertise. So he actually hired people. He built houses for them. That's the first thing he did. Instead of building the cathedral, he built houses for the workers so that they could work in the winter. They could work inside, and they could work indoors. So during the winter, they would cut stones to the right size, and during the spring and the summer, they would put the stones and they build the walls. So actually, he could triple the speed of construction just by taking quick care of his employees. And he did amazing improvements in management. This is how he built these cathedrals. After Suger built the first cathedral in Saint-Denis, The rest of Europe copy-pasted the system because all the cathedrals in Europe basically are a copy of Saint Denis. Suger created the management system that made it possible to produce with few disruptions. And I tell you, it's very similar to the Toyota production technique, production system that was popularized in the 1960s, 1970s.
That was amazing too. Maybe think of the Ford Motor Company in Detroit, where Henry Ford built the Ford Motor Company in Detroit and built houses for the workers as well. This is at a time where the cotton trade dried up in the South, and then they all came up from the South over to Detroit. They were offered $10 an hour back in the 1900s, which was like what, 40, 50, maybe $60 an hour today, and they all simply just took the opportunity and went up. It almost sounds like a model of that similar magnitude, which I thought of.
Yeah, you see this innovation and these management techniques disappear in history. Sometimes disappear for a century, several centuries, and then there is one person who just brings back. Sometimes because he's very clever, sometimes because he reads a lot about history. In the case of Suger, he was very clever. He was also very much of a traveler because he traveled a lot around France, and he looked at different people, different techniques. So he actually put it together. I don't know about Ford. I assume he also read about history, but these techniques actually they existed also in Venice in the 16th century when they built ships. They also use these production techniques, but the problem is that a few years later, they are completely forgotten, and then people go back to this nonsense of everything done by hand and everything done by one, and the standard of living goes down like hell because they forget how to work properly.
Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like people forget the stress level goes up, but then when you provide housing for the workers, like work in cathedrals or say with the factories and everything, the stress level tends to go down. And how do people, in your books, how do you handle stress effectively?
Well, they handle it very stress effectively. I actually wrote a full book about that. When you remove inconsistencies from your life and from the system. What makes people extremely stressed today, especially in the 21st century, when you have, you mentioned all this social media, you mentioned all this situation that people today seems to be extremely emotional. It is because we live, very often we live lives that are very inconsistent. People try to chase different rabbits in different directions. They change their goals every 5 minutes. And this is something that goes against human psychology. When you have someone who is very effective and very successful, usually it's a very stable person with stable views, with a clear picture of what he wants to do, at least the area where he wants to work. And these kind of people, unfortunately, they are becoming rarer every day because we have all this emotional disturbance, which is caused by lack of consistency. I think consistency in terms of intellectual consistency, professional consistency, relationship consistency is the key to living a life with low stress and to being very effective.
Mm-hmm. And what steps can people take to protect themselves, say, from unforeseen threats, disappointments, or unexpected stress, or something comes up major, or like a disturbance? What steps can people take to protect themselves?
There are different techniques. The easiest one that everybody can use is fragmentation or segmentation. When you try to break down the risk to a level that problems will only affect you to a minimum extent. For instance, if you have different skills, and you know, okay, man, you're a marketing executive, but you also know, I don't know, you speak a foreign language, and then you know different things. Even if you lose your job, or even if you lose your company, it goes bankrupt, you will not collapse because you have different skills. You can always do something else. You can move to a different city. You can move to a different country because you have this segmentation of skills, of friends. You have different types of friends. In case of divorce, you will be always able to rely on some friends. You have this segmentation of risk. It's like a bank, or you have an investment company. They will always break down the risk. They will spread the risk And if you follow this strategy, you can really cut 99% of problems in life, because you will not go down because you lose your job or you lose your company, you lose your house, because you have spread your risk in a good way. It's very difficult to do in practice because human beings, we tend to be very complacent. When we're doing well, we believe that we are immune to problems, and we say, "Oh, I'm so successful, everything's fine." This is the I would say it's a trick of the devil to make people arrogant and to make people ignorant. We always have to have, I would say, some modesty to understand that sooner or later there will be problems, there will be adversity, and to diversify your risk, to break down your risk, to have a fragmentation of different risks is very important to protect yourself in the future.
That is amazing too. And what do you foresee in the future as we speak?
I see a very positive future for the world because of the entrepreneurship wave we have. Not only in the US, not only in Europe, but across the world. You see today people starting companies, even in Africa, even in China, even in Asia, starting companies in different areas with very little capital. But today you can start a company for a very low investment, and you see this wave of entrepreneurship that is unprecedented in history. I mean, you can see this. You go back in history, you see this in Britain in the 18th, 19th century. You see this in the United States in the 19th century. But now you have it everywhere, and it's a trend that is extremely positive. That people can put the skills to work, that they can start companies with little capital. And I think this trend is underappreciated by the media. People tend to become very negative when they look at the situation today. But this is a very positive trend that I would like to see reported more often in the media. The number of companies that are created, people are starting businesses, people are traveling, they are learning different languages, they are trading with each other. This makes the world a better place, and it creates opportunities that even 10 years ago were unthinkable.
Mm-hmm. And that's an amazing point too. We'll talk about that next time we get together again. You've been fantastic, John. Love to have you on again soon. Just a couple more minutes here. We know you're very busy, but you've been very fantastic. And if you were to pick a time in history, like you go back, like it happened to a time machine, what year or era would you like to go?
Certainly the Renaissance, so the 14th, 15th century, where people actually rediscovered productivity, they rediscovered private property that was really almost forgotten during the Middle Ages. And you see, just to mention an example, people like Rubens was a great artist. And you see how Rubens, with very simple technology, very simple techniques, he made a great fortune. He created within 30 years an immense factory for selling his paintings, because he discovered the principles of marketing. He discovered how to run projects, and this kind of personalities that you see in the 14th, 15th, 16th century, they're fascinating. And I love to read this kind of biographies, because it gives you an idea what is possible today. And we have much better technology, we have many more possibilities. But when you see people doing this kind of stuff in the 16th century, 15th century, it's fascinating, and it gives you an idea of the human potential.
That is amazing too. Love to have you back on, John, and we'll talk more about this and just a couple of things when it comes to writing. John Vespasian, author of 10 books about rational living, including Rationality is the Way to Happiness, Philosophy of Builders, 10 Principles of Rational Living, and more. And also tell us, where can we find your books?
It's very easy to find my books. If you just type my name, John Vespasian, on Google or any search engine, you will find everything in 1 second. You have the blog, there are hundreds of free articles, you find my free newsletter, and you will find the books. They are available in different outlets. Very easy to find. Just type John Vespasian on Google.
That's great. And what's the best advice you can give the anybody at this point?
The best advice is to take things with the right perspective. Don't go crazy when you read the news every day. That always seems that the sky is falling, and this is like Chicken Little, and everything is going to collapse. come on, people. I mean, it's always the same story. And when it's not global cooling, it's global warming, and I don't know what. The world will continue to improve. There are many benevolent, intelligent people in different countries. People are not stupid. People are not trying to destroy the world. I think we have to open opportunities for dialogue, for improving things, and don't let the current events depress you. Look a bit ahead and look at the positive things we have today, the great opportunities, and I hope that the economy in the next decades will continue to improve in a very impressive way.
And also too, we'll talk about the events like the 2020 election, the previews, and also elections in other countries. And John, just want to say, like, to thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Let's talk more about that next time. Looking forward to having you again soon. And once again, tell about your website, your upcoming projects, and once again, how they contact you.
Very easy. Just type John Vespasian on Google. You will find website, you will find blog, you will find everything in 1 second. Very easy.
That's fantastic. John, again, a big thank you for your time. Looking forward to having you again soon. And please do everybody a favor, keep us up to date.
Many thanks, Mike.